There's something I've been talking about so much lately, and it's that people who make it to the top are not necessarily the most talented, the most gifted, the most skilled. They're the ones that just didn't quit. They're the ones that didn't make excuses, and they're the ones that had the mindset that this was going to work out no matter what. They were going to keep moving forward. They're going to keep challenging themselves. They were going to keep pivoting. They were going to keep that forward momentum through whatever comes up. They learned to pivot. They didn't attach their identity to a certain outcome of success. They said, this isn't it. I'm going to keep going until I reach that level of success I'm looking for. So it's really interesting because we can look around and that can actually trigger something within us. And it says, well, I'm better than them. Why are they making it and I'm not? Well, they were better at keeping going than you are. It's as simple as that. They're better at moving that momentum forward. And so when we look at ourselves and we think, I have a lot of skill, I have a lot of competency, I know what I'm doing here. And if you're not at the level that you want to, you have to evaluate why. It's not in comparison to somebody else who's made it. It's in comparison to yourself. You have to look at your little nuances. You have to look at your little ways that you sabotage your success. Where do you pull yourself back instead of showing up? For me, this is really relevant because it's coming up a lot in my life. And I can look around and I see these people who are making it. And this isn't talking from a place of bragging or a place of, me trying to be better than anyone else. I can look around and I can say my skill set is far more advanced than this person's. And they are, 50K month, 100K month, or at $1 million in 2 weeks. And I think, I wonder why. I wonder why that is. It's not about my skill set. My skill set's good. I'm good at what I do. And it's because I've quit on myself so much. It's because I doubted my ability to make that. It's because I had a ceiling cap on myself about how much money I could possibly make. Now, using these other people as an example, they broke through that ceiling cap. They didn't have that on themselves, or they did and they recognized it and they shattered it. And so even when you're doing this deep emotional work, you still have to be aware of where you default to these behaviors of pulling back. So for me, I had this story, right? I had this story of just not being smart enough or capable enough, right? That was always a very common story in my life. But then I have this other story of, well, this is one that wasn't meant for me. That was a story that I had created a long time ago and based off of my surroundings and different conditioning and things like that, where I grew up and things like that. So it was very much within me, but it wasn't a conscious thought until I started to really challenge that a few years ago. And I started to do this work and I started to really say, how can I bust that ceiling? But what I noticed was each time I busted the ceiling, it only went just a little bit further, right? And the ceiling got there again. And then the ceiling got there again. And so it was very much intertwined with this belief of not feeling good enough or capable enough. And then you mix in the income. So as you're building your business and as an entrepreneur, it's a huge part of it, right? So you will only rise to the height that you think that you're capable of, or that you think that you're allowed, right? So there's an allowance we think we can have. And until we bust through that, until we shatter that, and we actually have this really expansive state, we keep butting up against that ceiling, and then we pull back, and then we move into default behaviors of not taking action and not doing all these different things. And so when we get to this point of we're doing all this deep work and we've understand our triggers and we understand this and we're not reactive, right? But then maybe we still pull back a little bit. We have to question, is this coming from a default ceiling that I put on myself or a conditioned response? Or do I actually need to self-evaluate and say, no, I need to rest? Or am I doing something that's out of alignment? Or am I showing in a way that's not true to me? So it's not always about us having to change a certain belief that we have when we get to a certain point. Now, I would say most of you listening to this call still have a lot of beliefs that you need to bust through, right? A lot of beliefs that need to be shifted so you can start showing up in alignment and authentically. There's still a lot of fears and you're operating out of that fear space and the conditioned responses and that I should be doing this, or I'm jealous of this, or this hasn't happened to me because of these external circumstances. What I'm talking about here is once we've done that work and we identify those triggers and we get to kind of like, if we were to put it on like a linear scale, we get to like this next level. And this next level is where we can really start to fine tune it. And we can start to say, oh, I'm pulling back because something's not aligned. right? And this is what was happening for me. I'm not triggered by anything else necessarily. I'm not reactive to what's happening in my life. Needed to pull back because what I was doing, I was noticing I was doing because I thought it was what I should be doing. Right? The amount of videos I put out, the amount of content I put out, the way that I do that content. I was starting to shift into this different space of it's not in alignment with how I want to run my business. And it's as simple as that. So that belief gets shifted of, oh, I need to be doing this, to I don't have to be doing anything that honestly I don't want to do, or that's not in alignment with where I'm going. Now, the problem with that statement right there is I don't want to do anything I don't want to do is we don't want to do a lot of stuff. Right. And so if we're operating out of a deep space of fear-based, then you're not going to want to do a lot of things because you're not going to want to do them because you're scared. So that's what we have to understand, the texture of why we don't want to do it. The texture of, oh, it's not in alignment for me. Oh, because we can use that as an easy out and an easy scapegoat. But that's not, when we really understand it, we can say, oh, I'm making this decision out of fear, or I'm making this decision because I'm so far out of alignment to how I'm operating my business. So really the key factor here is really evaluating yourself along this way. And so I'm just going to kind of break this down into maybe some different like scales of, or different levels of where you're at. So if you're very reactive and you're still blaming circumstances and you're still looking at other people and you're jealous of them, then we have to first shift that jealousy from somebody else and recognizing that that's something that you want for yourself. And if you want it for yourself, then you know somewhere that it's capable, that you know you can have that. So instead of that other person being somebody that triggers you to withdraw, why not shift that belief to be somebody that triggers you to expand? Right? I want that. They're doing that. That means I'm capable of doing that. I have skill, right? I have the capability to move into that. So if they're doing it, the path is there. I just need to step into my own way of creating that success, right? So the trigger now shifts from being jealous of somebody else to saying, I'm going to use that as inspiration. If they can, I can. Let me move into that. So instead of it being constrictive, it becomes expansive, right? So we're looking at it from like that level. If we're still very reactive, or if we're still blaming, or we're still stepping into this space of, just not taking radical responsibility, then we still have a lot of deep emotional work to do. Okay. So if you're there, keep doing that deep emotional work. If you're there, work on your triggers and see what your triggers are trying to show you. Let your triggers be your best business coach, right? That's an important place to be. So I'm launching a community where you're going to be able to dive deeper into this. I'll put the information in the bottom, but it's something that you can also get in the space and get in rooms of other people who are doing this work and start to identify those triggers in your responses to it so you're less reactive. Okay, so that's one level. Then we get to like this next level where we're not really reacting as much, but we're still seeing these kind of self-sabotaging behaviors come up. Now we have to start to understand our deep conditioned response. Now we're looking at our habits that we've built based off of the beliefs that we have, right? So the beliefs are no longer there. That's not where we're operating out of. But those beliefs, those external circumstances are then triggering the habit and the conditioned response. This is where it gets a little tricky because then we're like, well, I've already outgrown that. And then it gets frustrated and like, oh, this stuff doesn't work. And you're going back and forth between that. No, it's a conditioned response. It takes time to not lean back into that conditioned response. It's like if you move, like you move houses, like you have a conditioned pattern that you would go home from, or that you would take your certain path every single day. You have to actively remind yourself that you're not going to that spot. And sometimes if your mind starts to lax a little bit, you find yourself going down a path that was just conditioned. It's just familiar. It was just muscle memory. So we're in that state sometimes, right? As we shatter the beliefs and we're moving into that next level, we remember that we go back into these habits, this muscle memory, if you will. So that's when we start to just, oh, I see it. I correct it. Again, no judgment, no shame. I see, I correct, I move on. Right. So I think that there's these different levels. Then we get to the next level where we're starting to see things very, very, very clearly. Right. And we can see it almost the instant it shows up for us. Or you can even say, oh, that would trigger my old self. Or, oh, that would trigger a response. Now I don't have to move into it. And now we get into this more evaluation space of, oh, but if I am feeling a little self-sabotage, it's not because of belief. It's not really even because of a conditioned response anymore. So maybe it's trying to show me something that's really out of alignment, something that feels so subtle that I'm actually not following what feels right for me. And then we start to evaluate those different levels and those different paths. And that's how we become really successful. That's how we really make this life that we want. And so we use other people as a mirror, one to show us our where we need to work on, right? That mirror shows to ourselves, but also to get that expansive state so we can bust through those ceilings that we create for ourselves. And again, at that top level, you might start to feel this little resistance and, oh, I hit, oh, I come back down. Oh, I hit, oh, I come back down. You say, what was that resistance that was built? Well, that was another conditioned response. I only thought I could make 10K, 15K, 20K a month. That was my goal. And now, oh, I keep hitting that and I come back down. Oh, I keep hitting that and I come back down. Well, there's something within you that's not expanding to say you can have more. Let's explore what that more is. Let's really evaluate that expansive state. And so this is really important when we get into this space of we look around and we see people who are not the most skilled in what they do, but they're at the top. And it's because they have done a level of this work, right? Whether it was conscious or unconscious, this has happened. They raised their ceiling. They removed that doubt that said that they couldn't and then moved it into I can. So if you're finding yourself hitting different points, I think there's that phrase that says like new level, new devil. That's what we're talking about here. We get to another level, there's something else that you need to bust through. And instead of thinking that as like being super overwhelming or something that's, now another chore, it just is simply what happens. And we're aware of it. It's not that hard. It's not that challenging. So what I encourage you to do is kind of just evaluate on that scale of where are you at? Are you still really working on these beliefs? Do you still really doubt yourself? Do you find a lot of imposter syndrome, right? Well, you're in this space where you really need to be working on that. Now, the next space is more of a reminder. Now we need to be reminded that we don't believe that anymore. Right. And then when we get to that third space, that's when we start to just, we're really busting through the ceilings. We're really moving to this next level because we see that expansion. I think those are some really powerful spaces to get in. And I'm building a community specifically for this. No matter which level you're at on this little, I almost like have a visual of a triangle. No matter which level you're at, we can always push forward. And the most important thing you can do is get that help, that support, and those resources. Be around people who are doing just that, who are pushing their ceilings, who you can look at and say, they're doing it. I can do it too. Right. Or you can be that for somebody else. You can be that inspiration for somebody else. So it's a really powerful space. So I'm going to drop the link. I'm going to invite you to it. It's just a wait list right now. So I'm super excited to share that with you. But what I want you to do is I want you to explore this. Where are you at on that scale? What does it feel like? And what's something that you can really start to evaluate so you can shift your paradigm and just absolutely bust through that income ceiling that you've put for yourself now?